Hello, my name is Caroline Stokes. I am CEO of Forward, and I am bringing together some of the most incredible brains to help us transition in this new era that we call the COVID era. I am absolutely delighted to bring to you today one of my heroes. She is Whitney Johnson. She is the CEO and founder of WLJ Advisors and is one of the leading management thinkers in the world, according to Thinkers 50. Whitney is an award-winning author of Disrupt Yourself and Build an A-Team, published by Harvard Business Press. Whitney is formerly an award-winning equity analyst on Wall Street. So she's been around the block and she's got a lot of advice to give us. Whitney, it is so good to have you on the podcast. Thank you for joining.
Caroline, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm so happy that we were able to meet a year ago back in the halcyon days when we all got together. But I'm just delighted that we're getting to connect today.
It is truly wonderful. I'm so glad you have the time because I know you're a very, very busy person. So thank you for your generosity of time. So I am really curious. We're in a very difficult situation right now. We've got winners and we've got people who are really, really suffering. Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you right now, what are you stoked about in our new world?
I am stoked about something that starts with an S, just like Caroline Stokes, and that is the S curve of learning. And I'm excited about that because this S curve, it's something that was popularized by E.M. Rogers in 1962. It looks a lot like a wave. But over the last couple of years, I have reimagined this as a way for us to understand how we learn and how we grow. And what it looks like is every time you start something new, you're at the base of this S and you're going to feel like you don't know what you're doing, and growth is going to feel very slow. Then you're going to put in the effort and you're going to get into that steep part of the S and you're going to be like, I know what I'm doing. I'm figuring it out. It's hard, but not too hard. And then you're going to get to the top of that S and say, I figured it out. It's time for me to do something new. And so you've gotten to the top, you've learned, and now it's time for you to leap and repeat. And the reason I am stoked about this right now is that oftentimes we have to make a decision. Do we jump to a new S curve or don't we jump? Do we jump? Don't we jump? And right now, we've all been pushed. We've all been pushed off our old S curve. We're on a brand new, concurrent with, we hope soon to be post-COVID S curve, and we're rethinking everything. And I think that's a very exciting time. It's a difficult time, and it's difficult for all of us in very different ways. But at the same time, it's an exciting time because it's a period of disruption. It's a period of upheaval. And if we will jump to this new S curve, if we will disrupt ourselves, which is my favorite topic in the whole world, we will not only manage, but we will thrive in this period of disruption. And to me, that is something to be very stoked about. See, I love that word. I love it. I love
it. That's wonderful. Thank you. So, again, we're going to have people that have had that aha moment. We're going to have individuals and organizations that had that aha moment very, very early on, and they went through that steep learning. There are people that may have just been laid off yesterday, and they are completely, devastated. The world has just turned upside down. What kind of advice would you give those people that are just probably hearing about the S curve and your analogy for the very first time, and how they could potentially apply it to themselves?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is that it's just really hard when you've lost a job or you've been laid off. I've been fired from a job. I think a lot of people are losing jobs right now. And I know. And that is just a really hard thing. And the reason that it's so hard is that we tend to really have our identity very much intermingled with the work that we do. And so when we lose a job, and you know this because this is the business that you're in, it's really hard. It's really tough on our identity. And we have to kind of deconstruct that and figure out how we put it together. So I wanted to just acknowledge that it is hard. Now, in terms of what do you do? Well, like I said, everybody's on an S curve. We've also developed a framework. It's called the Personal Disruption Framework. It's based on the work that I did with Clayton Christensen at the Harvard Business School. He wrote a book called The Innovator's Dilemma, and I worked with him for about 7 years.
And I'm so sorry he passed. I'm so sorry.
I know. The world lost a great man. So he had this whole framework of disruptive innovation. And after working with him, I had a really big insight or aha that this whole theory of disruption, it wasn't just about products and people and products and services, I should say, in companies and countries, but it was actually about people. And so that we as individuals could disrupt ourselves. And so we came up with this 7-point framework of personal disruption, that once you've been on this S curve and you are jumping or you've been pushed off this S curve, these 7 accelerants will help you move up that S curve more quickly. And what I would say to the individuals who've recently lost their jobs, number 1 is, one of the accelerants is this idea of step back in order to grow. You bring a fist back to punch, you crouch before you jump. Personal disruption is about stepping back in order to slingshot forward. And what I would say is that sometimes, certainly based on my experience, when we lose a job, it's sometimes that we knew it was no longer the right role, the right opportunity for us. We knew it. We could feel it deep in this part of ourselves. But for whatever reason, we wouldn't jump. We weren't ready to jump. And so the universe gave us that little nudge. And so I think that would be the first thing. And I would really encourage everybody to consider, is that maybe you will look back at this moment in time and say, this is the best thing that ever happened to me. You took a step back in order to slingshot forward. The second thing I would say, and we do have a podcast episode that you can listen to on this. I think it's episode 180. Step back to grow. And so it's like a half an hour that you can focus on that. But the second thing that I would encourage you all, I'm going to give you 2 more suggestions, is to think about this idea. This is accelerant number 1, taking the right risks of playing where no one else is playing. And this is episode 100 of our podcast. And oftentimes when we're looking for something brand new to do in our career, we think, okay, there's this job posting. It's on LinkedIn and there's 50 applicants for it. And you're like, okay, well, can I compete? Can I win? Can I get that job? You might be able to, but those are not odds that any of us like. Instead, you want to do what's called market risk. And according to the theory of disruption, when you take on market risk or play where no one else is playing, your odds of success are actually 6 times higher. And so what does market risk look like? What does playing where no one else is playing looks like? It looks like creating something, not competing. It looks like, you know what, there's this company or even inside of my company, and there's this problem that needs to be solved and it's not getting solved. And I think I can solve it. And so if you can create that opportunity, if you can create that market, there aren't 50 applicants. There's 1 applicant and it's you. And that's taking on market risk. Okay, third suggestion. You have strengths. Everyone has strengths, very unique, powerful strengths. But here's the thing. You may not know what your strengths are, what your best strengths are, because they're so reflexive, you can't see them. You're blind to them. And so one of the things I want you to really think about is what compliments are people giving you that you dismiss? What situations do you find yourself completely frustrated, thinking this is just common sense? Those are both 2 hints of those things that you do reflexively well that you're not aware of. Now, on that, what I want to say is it's important as you're looking for what you're going to do next is to stop only putting on your resume what you do well, because you like to put what you did well, because you worked really hard to do something well. I want you to start putting on your resume what you do best. I want you to start putting on your resume your superpowers. There's a way for you to talk about it, to quantify it. And when you feel strong, when you're playing to your strengths, you're going to be willing to play where no one else is playing. So you've already taken that step back, but now you're feeling strong. You're playing where no one else is playing. You're in a position to slingshot forward. And that's what you do when you disrupt yourself. You're on this brand new curve. Those are 3 things you can do to move up that S curve.
And that's wonderful. It's so positive what you're talking about, because it's providing that it's really reaching into yourself and gathering data or reminding yourself about what other people have said to you, so you're able to rebuild. Because as you've said, we connect so much with the work that we do that when that happens, it can just drag us down, and it can be very hard to get out of that. So I really like that 3-step process. So anybody that's just lost a job, please listen to Whitney. She knows what she's talking about. Nobody gets a Thinkers 50 award for not knowing stuff. So
Well,
I know that.
you know,
She knows stuff. She knows stuff.
I
No,
know.
that's very good. What about organizations? Because organizations are kind of going through that S curve at various levels. We've found that organizations haven't adapted fast enough, or others, adapted on a dime. Because I think Simon Sinek said something quite similar recently, where I think it was in May during one of his shows. He was talking about a pizza restaurant in New York that suddenly had these ovens. They weren't able to make pizzas anymore, so they started making masks, and they for hospitals and things like that, and they adapt it really, really quickly. So you've got the people there that are able to think very entrepreneurially, if that's a word, entrepreneurially. I just didn't pronounce it correctly. And then there are others that are still struggling, and I see that now. I've seen CEOs quit. They just cannot. They do not, I think, want to continue, or maybe they don't feel they have the stamina, especially at this point after 6 months, to continue and take it through that next growth stage. So that's just a whole mix of things just thrown at you. What do you think the step is now? Because we're 6 months into this, and we know it's not going to get any easier, really.
Yeah, so I think, okay, so you threw a lot at me, so I'm just going to riff right back at you. As you said, before we started, let's do a little jazz, so let's do a little jazz. I think the first thing I would say on that is that this is a time where our stamina is really being tested. And mental health is a really big challenge, as people are really struggling to deal with everything that's happening. And so the first thing I would say to people, and this is something that I've had to practice, is how do I make sure I'm taking care of myself? Like, that is the first thing. So yes, we need to be innovative, and we're going to innovate our way out of this, but we cannot innovate if we are not healthy physically and emotionally. And so a couple of suggestions that I would make to you all, which I hope you're already doing, is be really mindful about what you're listening to on media. Be very careful about your media diet. If you're a news junkie, I understand, but really limit how much you're listening to the news, because every single negative thing that's coming into your head, that's a downer. And then you're going to have to pick yourself back up from that. So be really, really mindful about what you're putting into your brain. The second suggestion I would make is because again, you can't create if you've got all these difficult ideas competing with you. Second thing, and this goes back to stepping back in order to grow. I talked about you're losing your job, but another kind of step back is to take a break. One of the things I've been really diligent about, I had learned from Tiffany Shlain. She talks about this thing called a tech Shabbat, and rest as a technology. And so I have been very disciplined about Saturday night. I turn off my computer. I don't turn it off, but I pause my email. I pause my texts. And on Sunday, I do not work. Now, I do this in part for religious reasons, but you can do it for technology reasons. And she says, technology is supposed to make your life better. Well, what if we thought of rest as a technology? So the only way that you are going to make it through and have the stamina that you need to move forward is you taking a step back to slingshot forward. And that includes I'm going to pound my fist on the table, you must take breaks. Marathon runners take breaks. You walk, you run, you walk, you run, etc. So that would be the first thing. It's foundational, very, very important. In terms of as an organization, what I would say to you is, we talked about this S curve. Well, from an organizational perspective, your company and your team is just a collection of those S curves. And so what you want to do as a team is say, or as an organization, is ask yourself, okay, so where are all my S curves? How many of my people are in the sweet spot of that S? Because that's ideally what you want. Most of your people there where it's hard, but not too hard. So they're pushing them, but it's not crushing them. You want 15% at your low end, because they're going to be brand new and they're the pipeline. And they're also asking questions like, why are we doing it like this? And you're like, oh, that's annoying and very valuable. Why are we doing it like this? And then you need 15% of your people in your organization that know what they're doing. They know a thing or two, as you said earlier. And they're able to say, well, we tried this, but why don't you try that? And they're also able to be this anchor and to stabilize the people who are moving along that curve. And so then what you've got happening is, now that you're rested, you've got everybody on your team, they're on their S curve. You're helping them build momentum along their own S curve. From there, you now have a team and a company that can innovate, because you're structuring your team with people who are in the sweet spot and the low and the high end respectively. And so what I would say is you've got to be rested. You need to understand that everyone in your organization is on an S curve, including you, the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
You want to manage that momentum along that curve. And when you help your people grow, then your organization is going to grow. And so for everyone who's thinking, I don't know what to do, what are we going to do? Well, stop for a minute and think about, am I helping everybody on my team grow? Because if I can pull back and focus on the people on my team, they're going to figure it out. You have really smart people who work for you. They can figure it out. And then also that's going to allow you to not have to carry everything on your shoulders yourself. So that would be my suggestion. Take a step back in order to grow in terms of rest and also developing your people. They will take you forward.
So logical, so logical. Thank you for that. So when John Lewis died, I was propelled into his mantra of creating good trouble. And that's why I decided to create this podcast.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious to find out what good trouble you're creating.
What good trouble am I creating? That is a great question. It's funny. I don't really think of myself as a troublemaker, but I suppose I am a disruptor. So I guess that's a certain kind of troublemaker. Yeah, I think that what I'm doing is this is good, the best kind of trouble. There's trouble right here in River City. I think the best kind of trouble is to have everybody who will listen to me understand that we were made to act and not be acted upon, to understand that if you'll disrupt yourself, if you'll step back from who you are today, even these small little micro actions, you can slingshot forward. And that to me is the best kind of trouble, because we're upending the world as we know it to make it a better, more interesting, more exciting, more optimistic place.
Beautifully said. I love that. Thank you very much. So my question then is, why is it emotionally intelligent to do that?
Oh, why is it emotionally intelligent to do that? Well, that is a great question. So let me think about this for a second. Well, our emotions are really the seat of who we are. Our emotions are the heart of who we are. So we've got our brain and we've got our heart. And if you think about how do we change? Well, we change by using our free will, our ability to act, and we make decisions about what we put into our brain. So that idea of the media diet. But it's ultimately our heart and the emotions that are going to dictate how we behave. And so when we're willing to put into our brain, I'm going to disrupt who I am today to be different tomorrow, then our brain or our heart, the emotions, they don't know the difference between a truth and a lie. And if you tell your brain enough, then your emotions start to believe that. And when your emotions start to believe that, you're happy because you feel the sense of wellness, the sense of wholeness, the sense of everything is okay. It will be okay. And when you feel it will be okay, then you can carry the burdens of the people around you and they will feel it will be okay. And then we can all move forward in a way that the person who's struggling, and we've talked about people struggling, I can hold for them for just a moment. And then when I'm struggling, they can hold it for me just a moment. And then we can hold it together and move forward. And I know I sound like I'm in a spiritual revival, but that's where you're taking me in this conversation.
Well, you made me have a few tears, so thank you for that. I could see how far down you went into connecting all of that, and that's what made me well up, because you are an academic, an intellect, you're an author of 2 business books, and no doubt more are coming through. So for you to dig down deep on that was much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for asking the question.
Oh my goodness. So my final question, and I'm pretty sure you've already answered this, but we will see. Which is what one thing can people do today to either disrupt themselves, identify where they are on the S curve, or just how to deal with this era? I think I just asked you 3 questions there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's start with, if you want to figure out where you are on the S curve, you can go to my website, scurvelocator.com, and you can take the S curve. Okay, so that's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is if you're really trying to think about what are my strengths and you want sort of this boost of sort of vitamin D for disruption, you can listen to podcast episode 120. So that's another thing you can do. And then I'd say the third thing I would just encourage everybody to recognize is that if it's scary, if you think about disruption, you're excuse me, you're playing where no one else is playing. And so if you feel scared and if you feel lonely, then just know that you're on the right path.
I've never heard anyone say that before. Wow.
You just
say
did.
that. Tell me that again. So if you're
So
scared,
when you're disrupting, you're creating new markets. You're playing where no one else is playing, which means you're going to be by yourself. And so if you're scared and if you're feeling lonely, then you're on the right path.
that is genius. You should copyright that.
It's in my books, but yeah, maybe I should.
Well, get it out, get it out,
Yeah,
get
exactly.
it out. I think that's what people need to know right now. Yeah. Whitney, you have been the Monday morning injection of adrenaline and excitement and focus that I needed today, and hopefully for everyone else. And so thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me, Caroline.